I put 99% of my entire net worth into crypto a little under 2 years ago. And here's what ended up happening. A little under 2 years ago, I took every dime I had, except for the equity in my house, and ended up putting it into crypto. This was around late November 2022, after the collapse of FTX. I thought for sure that there were no sellers left after the collapse of FTX, and that we had reached the bottom of the market. What happened next, however, was absolutely insane. The market ended up at first going sideways for a little over a month. Prices didn't go up, but they also didn't go down either, which felt like a win after the insane year that 2022 had been. Despite that, overall, most people were saying that crypto prices were going to go much, much lower. You have to keep in mind that at the time, it was peak fear. People were saying because of the collapse of FTX, because of the collapse of Terra Luna, there were major insolvencies in the market. And because of these major insolvencies, there were projects and teams and funds that were about to blow up that were going to just cause the entire market to go and collapse much, much lower than we were currently sitting at. And this rang true to a lot of people because after Terra Luna and UST collapsed, we saw the same kind of pattern play out. We had a bunch of crypto trading firms and things like Celsius end up blowing up and collapsing. And we had suffered through this for almost a year. And so when FTX collapsed, people were thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be another wave of collapses. Crypto isn't going to survive this. And obviously it made sense. It was like a logical argument to most people. Because of that, we're going to go a lot lower than we were sitting at currently. And personally, I actually wasn't very worried, which maybe in retrospect was actually kind of stupid. In general, it just tends to be not a great idea to throw your entire net worth into a risky asset class. But I have this really insane goal of hitting over $50 million in net worth by the time that I'm 35. And although I understand people's opinions that like, that's stupid. Like, why would you risk your entire net worth just to hit this crazy goal? Like, be smart, be responsible. I get that. I really do understand that. I've also learned over the past couple of years that I'm capable of a lot more than I think I am. Risk is just a part of the journey inherently if you want to achieve really insane things. And I really enjoy the journey of trying to tackle these insane goals. And honestly, like even with as much money that I've made so far, I don't really even know how to spend that money. And I haven't been spending that money. I mostly live the same lifestyle I did before I started this journey. So I'm not like as attached to that money as maybe I should be. And I'm not that afraid of necessarily losing it. I'm okay taking those risks. And if I have to start back over at zero, I'm confident that I could, and I could build back up again. And to be fair, it's not like I'm just like blindly throwing my money into just like every altcoin out there trying to 1,000x it. Like I historically have been pretty decent at mitigating risk throughout the different cycles. I was able to sell kind of close to the top, was able to hold on to most of my money. I'm really good at position sizing and allocating well across capital. So I do have, it's not like I'm just blindly going into this. I do have a strategy, and I've done this for a while, and I put a crazy amount of research and effort into making sure that like I understand what I'm doing, and that helps offset a lot of the risk. And as they say, fortune favors the bold. Like you kind of got to take crazy risks if you want to achieve crazy results. In my opinion, not doing anything and just being like fearful is also a type of risk. Anyways, time goes on. Come January, the markets end up going insane. Bitcoin went from a low of 16,000 all the way up to 30,000 by mid-April. And along with Bitcoin, just about everything else went up in price as well. And it was during this period that I made some pretty insane gains on like various different alts I'd allocated into, like Akash, etc. Now, around mid-April, however, the market started to kind of falter and go sideways again. And again, even though we'd have kind of like this bullish season, people were still scarred from FTX and Luna, and people were still saying the same thing. It's like, okay, we had this little relief rally, is what they were calling it. We had a small relief rally. That made sense. But now we're going to dip even lower. If you look at maybe past 2017 cycle chart, 2013 cycle chart, you can see that like when the market goes into a bear market, it does these things where it like dips, tries to go back up, and then it dips lower, that tries to go back up, and then dips lower. It's kind of like this little stair stepping down, right? And so people are saying that was what was going to happen. This was a little bit of a relief rally, but we were going to actually go to new lows, and it was time to sell, and it was time to get out. And kind of along with all this, because of the fallout from FTX, there was a lot of political pressure against crypto. And we started to see these political attacks with the SEC coming after a lot of crypto companies, a lot of politicians calling out crypto, a lot of really negative news coverage of crypto. All this was happening at the same time. I, however, was convinced that we were going to see a second rally in late 2023 into early 2024. This was actually, in my view, all the way back in 2022, late 2022, based on what I was seeing happen with the market. So back then I made this tweet and I was like, hey, we're going to see this crazy rally late 2023, early 2024. More time goes on. Around June, we get this insane, out of nowhere announcement that BlackRock is going to be launching a Bitcoin ETF. And this was massive, massive news at the time. But we tried to do ETFs for years. None of them had succeeded. It was really, really hard to do. But people were saying now that BlackRock was jumping into it, we were going to get this ETF because BlackRock doesn't fail when they want to get an ETF. And when they say, like, they had this crazy track record, it's like 575 ETFs they tried to get. Out of 575, they'd only had one ever in history that hadn't been approved. So people were saying this meant we were going to get a Bitcoin ETF. Getting a Bitcoin ETF mean we were going to have all these flows come in from TradFi. It was huge news. Came out of nowhere. Nobody was expecting this that I knew of. And this was just kind of like shook the markets and was really crazy. And it wasn't just BlackRock. Like with BlackRock, a ton of other companies came out and said, hey, they were also going to apply for an ETF. It's like suddenly TradFi across the board was like, hey, we support crypto. We're bullish crypto. You had the CEO, Larry Fink of BlackRock, doing all these media tours talking about how crypto is the future, tokenization is the future. It was crazy. It was like a really crazy time. And I was just like, wow, I can't believe this is happening. This is crazy. And with this news, we did get kind of like a bump in price. Like price went back up, but it wasn't really able to go back up higher than the highs we had in April. And then it kind of declined over a period of time. So people pointed to that and said, hey, look, it couldn't even, we had this BlackRock announcement. Even that couldn't bring us to new highs. Like, we're doomed, it's going lower. And that was kind of like the sentiment at the time. And price actually declined all the way into September. So from there, all the way into September, price was just going down. People were upset, people were sad, people were angry, people were attacking each other on Twitter, all the normal things people tend to do when price is going down. And personally, when I was looking at the fundamentals, I was like really bullish. But maybe this is just like my story. Like I just tend to be bullish. But I was really bullish because I was like, okay, we have these ETFs potentially coming in. Those get approved. We're like, we're going to go to the moon. We have all this other stuff happening. Like, why are people bearish? I didn't understand it. I'm like, look at the fundamentals. This is bullish. That was my view. Of course, though, I did question this, like with so many people saying differently. I was like, I was a little bit nervous that maybe I was wrong, but I was convinced that I was right. Like that this was going to actually end up doing really well. We were going to still see this rally that I was expecting in late 2023, 2024, and that just everyone else was wrong. That was me. Like, you guys are all wrong. I'm right. We're gonna see this rally. Again, maybe stupid, but that's how I felt. What ended up happening next was absolutely insane. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second, but really quick. The Obsidian Council is my private research community where I share monthly research, my entire portfolio updated monthly with the exact allocation I bought and a ton more. We've had projects like Pendle, which went up over 1,500%. Projects like Solana, which is up over 740%. Akash, which is up over 1,000%. And recently Goon, which went up over 179,000%. Although, as a quick disclaimer on that last one, 179,000% is insane. We got really lucky with that one. That's far from normal and unlikely to repeat or happen again. We also have the airdrop guide, which some members made over $26,000 last year from airdrops alone, covering their membership for literally decades. I personally made well over 100K between this year and last, and I share everything I'm doing personally with airdrops with the community via the monthly airdrop guide. And it is worth noting that airdrops have slowed down recently, and I'm not 100% sure where they'll go from here. I'm watching that space really close, and of course, I'm going to end up going wherever the opportunity is. The Obsidian Council is currently closed, but if you want to join, there's a link in the description of this video. Around mid-October, price finally started trending up. And a lot of people at the time said that this was in anticipation of the Bitcoin ETF potentially getting approved. I'm honestly not so sure that was the case or not, because obviously it was my bull thesis that like way back in 2022, I was like 2023, 2024, late 2023, early 2024, we're going to see this crazy rally. I was saying that well before the ETF was even announced, like people even knew about it. So I'm not really sure if it was the fundamentals. I was actually right. It was fundamentals, or maybe I just got lucky. We had this ETF come out of nowhere and it happened to be, have an approval date of January. And, because that we rallied. Honestly, I don't know. Regardless, we ended up going up quite a bit higher to a high of $48,000 for Bitcoin, with a lot of alts doing really decently as well. At the time, actually, meme coins were also doing really, really well across the board, which kind of caught a lot of people off guard. And that's a whole nother story. I'm not going to really get into that. But everyone seemed to be really excited that we could potentially get this Bitcoin ETF and that things could go well, that it could get approved. Obviously, at the same time, there was people that were bearish saying, hey, this isn't going to get approved. Look at the SEC. They're attacking all these companies. There's no way they're going to approve this. It's not going to happen. You had kind of both camps arguing back and forth. There was a lot of uncertainty at the time. Nobody really knew. And it turned out that the people that thought that the ETF was going to get approved were in fact correct. The SEC ended up approving all the ETFs across the board. Everyone was like, just wow, this is crazy. The ETFs are approved. We're about to go to the moon. And then Bitcoin's price absolutely plummeted. And this is when critics came out of the woodwork. They're like, okay, the ETF went live. There's obviously no demand for this thing. Look at prices are plummeting. You guys were all hyped up. This was the only thing keeping crypto afloat. This was the only thing people were excited about. And it ended up being a total dud. Across the board on Twitter, I saw this. It's like people like, this was a dud. This is a complete failure. We're going back to new lows. People were actually saying this. They're saying, we're going to go to lower lows now because the only thing that kept us afloat was the ETF, and it ended up being a huge disaster. As I tend to be, however, I was actually really bullish at this time. I have lived through enough hype events, token launches, etc., to know that, yeah, typically when the thing happens, it's sell the news event, right? People bought in expectation of it. There's all these unlocks when it actually happens where people are like, okay, I'm going to sell now. I'm going to, lock in that profit. That always tends to happen with these big news events. And just to pause here, I'm showing receipts throughout this video. If for some reason you're just listening to this, I'm showing receipts throughout this video to show that I'm not just like making things up, like that I actually felt these things during these time periods. It even seems kind of absurd to me how right I ended up being about a lot of these things and how accurate I ended up being on some of the timings of these things. I put a lot of work in, a lot of research. I spend a ridiculous amount of time listening to podcasts, reading through research, and then just kind of looking over the data and forming my own opinions. But even like the best on the planet is not going to get it right 100% of the time. And I always account for the fact that like I'm going to miss sometimes. But for whatever reason, during this period of time, I just went through a period of like nailing quite a bit of things eerily accurate. So there is obviously a bit of luck involved in this process because I can't actually predict the future. So there's just no way that I'll always get it right 100% of the time. For sure am going to miss sometimes. So yeah, on some level, there was an element of luck involved. I don't expect to be right 100% of the time. And but it was really cool. It was obviously really cool to experience. Like, okay, I was right about that. I was right about that. I was right about that. It showed that like on some level, my research and all this stuff was paying off. And I was onto something. Anyway, what ended up happening next after this caught everyone off guard, including myself. Bitcoin ended up skyrocketing from $39,000 to a new all-time high of $73,000. And again, to pause back here, back in late 2022, when I went all in on the market, I'd originally gone all in on ETH. So I stuck most of my money into ETH. I view it as like a transitionary asset. Same with Bitcoin. Like between the two of them, they're like the safer assets within crypto. I didn't feel comfortable throwing like 100% of my net worth pretty much into like some random alt. So it's like ETH or Bitcoin. I chose ETH. I thought it would outperform. I ended up actually being wrong about that. And ETH did do really well compared to Bitcoin until that ETF was announced. But then it definitely started underperforming Bitcoin. So Bitcoin actually outperformed what ETH did. But again, ETH was my transitionary asset. It's like a reserve asset to give me market exposure as I'm allocating into alts. But I just, at the time, I didn't know like all the different alts that I would want to allocate into. And I wasn't just randomly going to like spray my money across just random different alts. So as time would go on, like every week I was doing research. I was like trying to find good projects to allocate my capital to. When I'd find it, I'd allocate, sometimes 1%, sometimes less than 1%, sometimes 5% into a certain position. So this whole time I'm like slowly allocating in all these various different alts to where today only a small percentage of my capital is still sitting in ETH. Although I would highlight the difference isn't as stark as it might seem. I was staking my ETH, so I earned about 3, almost 4% from staking it. Plus, I earned a ton of airdrops. So I did a lot of airdrop farming. I earned over $100,000 between 2023 and 2024 doing these various airdrops. So I was able to earn on top of my ETH as well. And alongside of that, some of these alts, like Akash I mentioned, ended up doing really, really well. I had others that didn't do well. I had some that went down 90%. And that's just how it's going to be. When you allocate into various alts, I always say this, I always expect 6 out of 10 to go to 0. I expect 2 to do okay, 1 to do good, and hopefully 1 to do great. And I've been doing a little bit better than that because just across the board, crypto has been going up. So I haven't had any go to 0, but I have had some go down 90%. So not all of them did well, but some of them did insanely well. And so overall, my portfolio was definitely going up and to the right, like it was doing really good. In fact, overall bottom to top. So from the very bottom when I first got in, all the way to the top, the height of the market, I ended up taking my net worth, my entire portfolio up overall 500%, which is crazy. Because again, I'm not talking about just one position. This is my entire net worth going up 500%. Blew my mind. It was crazy in just a year period. So in just essentially a little over a year period, I took my entire net worth up over 500%. And I'm dealing with a decent amount of capital. I made a lot during last bull market. I held on to most of that during the bear market. So this was a life-changing amount of money that I was making. And I was just like, whoa, this is crazy. I can't believe this has worked out so well. I was on top of the moon. I was feeling amazing. I was feeling like a genius. But sadly, this euphoria, this amazingness would not last for very long. We ended up peaking in early March, and then from there, the market started declining from a high of $73,000 for Bitcoin to a low of $49,000 by September. And it was obviously, this is over a period of a couple of months. Obviously, through this process, the market became incredibly bearish again. And I'm not even kidding. People, yet again, came out of the woodwork and were calling for new all-time lows. I don't understand who these people are. Like, you can only be wrong for so long. But apparently these people, like, they just double down over and over again. We're going lower, going lower, going lower. So new people are calling for all-time lows. People turned really, really bearish again. However, I, once again, was calling for another rally, a rally in late 2024. And this is something I've been talking about for over a year. For over a year, I've been saying, hey, late 2024, we're going to see a rally. Late 2024 into 2025, we're going to see a potential rally for crypto. And this, again, is just all based on fundamentals, all the things that I'm looking at. I'm saying, hey, this is actually really bullish. I don't understand what you guys are talking about. Crypto is really strong, late fall into winter. I expect us to rally. And I recently did a video on some of those fundamentals and why I'm so bullish. If you want to check that out, it's really, really good. I go into a ton of in depth as to why over the long-term picture, the spice must flow. And I believe there's nothing that can stop crypto from going up. However, once again, I do feel a little bit crazy because it feels like that's not consensus. Most people don't have the same bullishness that we're going to see this rally. In fact, a lot of people are very bearish. People are bearish about the rate cuts for some reason. That doesn't make any sense. It's because sometimes short term, you see a dip with rate cuts. Long term, though, it's always bullish. So that's the part I don't understand why people are bearish about that. People are bearish about that we could see this recession. But everywhere I'm looking, every expert that I'm listening to, they're saying, even if we see a recession, it's going to be mild. And even if we saw an extreme recession, in my opinion, rate cuts go to zero. Rates are cut to zero, extremely bullish, and we get quantitative easing, extremely bullish. So it's like, even if we lose, we win, in my opinion. So I'm not seeing it. And as of this point, we actually don't know how the rest of the story plays out. I'm once again calling for a rally. Once again, I don't know what's actually going to happen. I'm in the same situation that I have been. And like I said, I'm not going to forever be right. I will be wrong eventually. That absolutely will happen. Nobody can predict the future perfectly. Just because I've gone through a winning streak doesn't mean I'll continue going through a winning streak. In fact, I could go through a losing streak. That's totally possible. So I don't know. Will I be right again? Is it time for me to finally be wrong? Only time will tell. I do, however, have absolute conviction. Regardless of if we do see a rally late 2024 or early 2025, crypto is going higher from here, and that we are in overall a very bullish uptrend. That at this point, there's nothing that can stop crypto from going higher. That we are on the long term time horizon, we are going higher. The fundamentals are too strong for us not to go higher. The spice must flow. That is my long-term conviction, and that is like a deep conviction. That's not a loose conviction. I would say it's like a mid conviction, like late 2024, 2025, we could see a rally. I felt like that for a while. That's like a mid conviction. But occasionally, it's very rare, I have these really strong convictions. When I jumped in late 2022 into put all my net worth into crypto, that was a strong conviction. I was like, there's no one left to sell. There's no one left to sell. I know we've hit bottom. I felt very strongly about that. I didn't actually know, but I felt very strong. I had a deep conviction. And right now I have a deep conviction, long term, over the next couple of years, crypto's going higher. Like this, that is my conviction. That is my current conviction. And that doesn't mean like when I say over the long term, next couple of years, crypto's going higher. Like if it plays out the way I'm thinking, like rally late 2024 into 2025, we hit like a new all-time high, maybe late 2024 or at some point in 2025. We'd peak some point in 2025, and then we likely enter another bear market in 2026. So like we'll hit a peak, it'll go lower in 2026, and then we can have a period of like just roughness in 2026 before continuing back up. So not that we can't have a big crash and down period again. We definitely likely will see that again, because as things are more and more bullish, people start to think it's going to go up only, leverage enters the market, and then things eventually collapse. So I'm not saying that won't happen. I'm just saying overall market forces are going to push this higher, regardless of the ups and downs. The market, the general direction is higher. It's up. That is my deep conviction. Currently, my portfolio is sitting around 200% up from bottom to top. So from bottom to top, my portfolio is up 200%. Obviously, I have some positions that are up 20x. I have some positions that are up even higher than that. But as a whole, when you account for my losses, my bigger positions, just as a whole, in aggregate, my portfolio is up 200%. And if you guys remember in some of my older videos, I used to state my 3 goals for this cycle. 1,000 being my lower goal, so 1,000% this cycle. 5,000% being like my mid goal, like I'm trying to get my portfolio up 5,000% as a mid goal. And 10,000% being like my ultimate goal, like my Hail Mary, everything goes perfect. Maybe I can get my portfolio up 10,000%, would be insane. That's like my Hail Mary goal. Last cycle I was able to take my portfolio up around 4,000%. So I've never done 10,000%. That's like a crazy, crazy goal. But even 4,000% would be life-changing for me. Obviously, I'm still a long way off and it's going to take a lot of work to get there. We'll see what happens. Anyway, take all this as you will. Obviously, this is my personal opinion, my personal insight. This is not investment advice. I'm not your investment advisor. I'm not your dad. I'm not your coach over here. You got to make your own decisions for yourself and act like a grown adult and, take responsibility for your own actions. Make sure to sign up for my free weekly crypto newsletter. It's mostly just all my content I put out each week in an easy email so you don't miss it. But occasionally I drop some other cool stuff in there as well, including sometimes I share alts in there that I haven't talked about in any videos. And if you want to go more in depth, make sure to check out my podcast, the 1 to 1 Million podcast. Recently, I renamed my podcast from Never Die to 1 to 1 Million, and I do weekly episodes where I interview some of the biggest names in the crypto space, including I've had people like Sandeep, the founder of Polygon, Robbie, the founder of Immutable, Sriram, the founder of Eigenlayer, and a ton more. I also do in-depth research on various projects, the markets, and more. As always, if this video is helpful, make sure to hit that like button. If you have any questions or comments or anything to add, let me know in the comment section below. And if you want to see more videos like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the little bell next to it to be notified each time I release a new video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.